Chapter 6 of the Wolf.
Taos had never felt so free. The idea of being a werewolf was still overwhelming. However, after running through Zion with Bourdon, Taos figured out one thing. It would not be all bad. His vertical leap was close to 5 feet, and he could plant himself on any surface with his claws. The freedom of movement was overwhelming. Every time he felt he had reached his limits, he realized he could push harder. They ran up the canyon, and for now they had been going up the center of Zion Canyon. So on the top of immense powers, he stared at the walls of stone rise out of the earth. They started at the base of the canyon. Taos almost fell over himself 3 times because his eyes trained up instead of on the trail. The canyon got deeper as they went up. With each step further, Taos felt closer and closer to himself. They stopped for a moment at a spot Bourdon had heard the humans refer to as Weeping Rock. Taos gazed back down into the canyon, his head swimming from all the change. But the view gave him perspective. Here among the cliffs that had taken millions of years to form, he began to feel in place. Bourdon started them running again through the canyon, and as they rounded Big Bend, Taos looked up at Angel's Landing, with the great white throne behind that. The view, like all views in the canyon, was spectacular. As they neared the top of the canyon and began to narrow, all of a sudden Bourdon jumped up and started to run along the wall. Then with a leap he launched to the stone wall on the opposite side. Taos howled with laughter. He launched into the air and onto the side of the wall. He started great. He stuck himself to the wall and even started running along. But then he tried the leap. He grunted and he pushed himself off the wall, and he realized he was not going to make it. He'd also not checked his angle, so he hit a tree and spun out of control and landed in the sand and rolled into the water of the river. Taos came up quickly, standing ankle-deep in the virgin river with sand and wet fur all over his body. Bourdon was there in a moment, laughing. "Nice try," he bolted. Taos came out of the river and tried to wipe off his fur. Bourdon laughed again. "Put your human days behind you, Taos. Do it like a wolf," Bourdon said. Taos looked up confused, but then a smile grew as he shook himself in the middle of a twist, like a dog does when getting out of the water. He felt silly, but it worked quickly. He looked up at Bourdon, who was laughing and shaking his furry head. They continued their run for about an hour, winding up at the bottom of the Narrows. Taos, once again stunned by the view. At the entrance of the Narrows, the walls soar 1,000 feet in the air, and at the bottom of the canyon it is only wide enough to hold the Virgin River. They sat looking up at the view for a while, and then they went down the canyon a bit, and then climbed up an outcropping. From the top of the Temple of the Swahini they took in the canyon. "Welcome to my home," Bourdon said with a toothy grin. "Our home," Taos corrected with a grin. And so it went for about a week. Taos started to think like a wolf. He learned quickly, much to Bourdon's surprise and pleasure. He again tried the leap, but again he fell. This time he slid hard into some jagged rocks and got cut up a bit, which was the first time he had witnessed his enhanced healing ability. Weeks drew into months, and a year into his wolfhood, Taos ran into a problem that Bourdon had never encountered. They were running back over a set of domed mountains, right by a cliff where they had been hanging out in the morning. Taos heard crying, the crying of a child. He motioned as Bourdon. They sped into the canyon towards the crying. As soon as they were on the ground, Bourdon heard it as well. They stopped short. There sat a small boy that could be no more than 11. They sat in the bushes away from the boy. "He must be lost," Taos said. Let's see if we can find where there are people," Bourdon said, and they ran up to the canyon wall. There was a camp, but very far away. The boy would most likely not be found. Night was already falling, and they dropped back to the canyon floor. "We need to take him back to his camp," Taos said. "Taos, how are you going to introduce yourself?" "Hello, I'm Taos, a giant 7-foot werewolf," Bourdon questioned. "I can't let him just be lost," Taos said, and moved toward the clearing. "Boy, can you hear me?" Taos spoke out loud. There was hope in the boy's face. Yes. "Good. Listen, I am here to help, but I do not look normal. Tiles attempted to explain. Confusion washed over the boy's face. "I am a werewolf, boy, but I will not hurt you," Tiles said. The boy shifted from foot to foot. "All right," he said. He thought he was ready, but as Tiles emerged from his hiding place, he could not help the fear building up in him. He held himself in check as best as he could. "Boy, I promise if I were going to eat you, I would have done it already," Tiles said to comfort the boy. It didn't work. "I promise I'm here to help," Tiles pleaded. The boy looked up at him, the tears making tracks in the dirt on his cheek. "Really?" he asked. "Yes, really. Let's get you back to your camp." And the boy started to hike toward the camp. In only a moment or two, Tios realized the boy was already exhausted from the hike in the canyon. He picked the boy up and ran through the canyon, not too fast. The boy grew more and more comfortable with the wolf, and within a half an hour they were at the edge of the boy's camp. They could hear people yelling back and forth about the missing boy. "You need to go to your kind," Tios said. "But you must never mention seeing me," Tios added. "I won't." He started to walk to his camp, and then turned back. "Will I ever get to see you again?" the boy asked, mustering all his courage. "Well, this is my home. If I smell you here, I will come and try to say hello," Tios replied. "Thank you," the boy squeaked out and ran toward his camp, his mother screaming and grabbed him in a joyous hug. Tios stood and smiled as Bourdon came up next to him. "I am proud of you," Bourdon said. It was that night that Bourdon began to realize, if he were the first of the new breed of a wolf, Tios was the next step yet again. A wolf that still had interaction with humans was unheard of. But Tios was not a slave to the rules, and the laws set out before him. They disappeared into the night, and a young boy climbed out of his tent that night. He looked up to the sky. "Thank you," he said again to the woods.